Hello everybody and welcome back to the second shelf and to another tops and flops video, my monthly video, mostly monthly video, in which I talk about the best and the worst of the previous month. But this tops and flops is for 2 months, because in June I did a mid-year tops and flops, and also my reading at the moment is really good, so I have difficulties coming up with flops, and 2 months helped me to find some. But anyway, so it's the tops and flops for the months of June and July. And as always, we start with the tops. And within the tops, as always, we start with the book that I thought about the most. And it was a July read, and it was a reread. Becky Chambers' sci-fi book, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, the first book in her Wayfarer series, which so far consists of 4 books. And this one, the first one, was published in 2014. And I read this way back then on ebook, and finally I bought myself a box set of the Wayfarer series, including the short little book Taught If Fortunate, To Be Taught If Fortunate, and I reread this one. Long introduction to tell you about the book that I thought about the most. So if you're not familiar with this, it is a space opera kind of thing, a road movie, but in space, a road movie book, a road book. I don't think you say road book, but it's a travel thing. So you have this crew on a spaceship, and the spaceship is a ship that makes tunnels in space, which basically means wormholes in order for other ships to be able to travel fast distances really vast distances really fast. That was what I wanted to say. The science and the technological stuff is not important. It's also not really explained how it works, and that's not at the core of the book. At the core of the book is the crew. There are humans and other species and how they interact with each other, bringing their personal history, but also the history sometimes of their species along. And I thought this was such a brilliant way of having a fantastic sci-fi story. And you can just read that and enjoy it and fine. But it also makes you, at least it made me think about, topical issues like racism, how we look at people who are not like us. And it's done in such a engaging way without being, educational. And I don't even know whether Becky Chambers wanted to address things like that. But for me, these interspecies relationships, and also it's about relationship between 2 females of various species. So it's also about, sexism, or what it means to be attracted to the same gender but a different species, if that makes sense. I love that if a book does that. If a book is offering me the opportunity to go deeper, but first of all to enjoy a really good, well-crafted story. So it's not, I hate it when novels have these, the educational wagging finger. And look here, this is how you should think about racism, and racism is bad. And that doesn't work. But you can do it. And again, I don't know whether Becky Chambers meant to do it, but for me, this is one of the reasons why I thought about that book a lot. First of all, because of the topic, but also because as a writer, how you can address certain things without having, the teacher pet on while you're writing. I loved it. Next up in the tops category is always the book that surprised me the most. And this was a buddy read with Adam. As always, I will leave his Instagram account, a link to his Instagram account below, even though I have not given up the hope that he will return to BookTube at some point. You hear me, Adam? Like he's listening to me. Anyway, but we read Gwendolyn Brooks' Maud Martha, published in 1953. It's a short little novella, and Gwendolyn Brooks is known for her poetry. She was a Black American poet, and she was the first Black woman to receive the Pulitzer Prize for her poetry. Annie Allen, her collection. I haven't read Annie Allen, but I certainly will. And this one is also on my list for the 1001 books you have to read I have to read before I die list. But that's all preliminary. It is about the life of Maud from when she is about 7 until she is about 25. It doesn't, spoiler alert, it doesn't end with her death. It's just a portion of her life, and it's told in these small chapters, vignette-like chapters, where the author addresses a certain event or an incident or a dress or a dance she went to, and through these vignettes we get a picture of Maud's life. But why did this book surprise me so much? I'm, as you absolutely know, I'm not struggling with words here. I'm not, English is not my mother tongue. So I don't read books in the English language with this idea of that I know what beautiful language means in English. And sometimes it just strikes me like, whoa, this is so beautiful. And I remember those rare occasions when it happens. And one of the first time it happens with Edith Wharton, Age of Innocence, that I was just so struck by the beauty of the language. And it happened here as well. That after 1 or 2 pages, I was just like, I had to put the book down. I was like, whoa, this is like as if she sprinkles diamonds into the stories. And it's not pretentious or overwritten, let alone overwrought. So it's effortless. And it's just, also, it never works. I think if, you have one gorgeous sentence after the other, that doesn't work. It's a very nice language, and then all of a sudden you have this diamond, this gem popping out. So, I mean, I should have expected it probably because Gwendolyn Brooks was a poet. But like I said, it doesn't happen that often to me that it strikes me really like lightning how beautiful I personally find the language. And that's why that happened to me. And as I said, I can maybe recount 2, 3, maybe 4 books at most in the English language where this happened to me. So I will certainly remember this book. And then the last category in the tops is always the best nonfiction. And that was the most difficult category in a way because I read so much really, really good nonfiction. Among other things, I read Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, which was a 5-star read, and it was an excellent book. But in the end, I decided to go with a newer release, and that was a book that I've gushed about quite a bit, Michelle Nijhuis, rhymes with my house. So Michelle Nijhuis, Beloved Beasts, published last year. And I read some reviews in which the reader says, well, I was bored. And that pained me. I mean, because I thought it was such a lovely book, and such a wonderful book, and such a good book. It's about the story of conservationism, mainly in the US, but also with an outlook broadly to the UN and Africa. And it tells a story of people who were from the 19th century onwards engaged in that quest to conserve nature, to do something against species that were endangered, or to reintroduce species that were extinct, stuff like that. And I thought, I can understand if you are not interested in that particular kind of science, people and the lives of those people, you might find it boring. But it's not, the book is not boring. It's just then the book is not for you. I'm not criticizing you if you find it boring, don't get me wrong, but it just means the book is not for you. But if you are interested in the topic, and again, I've gushed about this book multiple times, and I read it with Heidi from my reading life, and she gushed about it on her channel. But I really think that this book didn't get the attention that it deserved, because for all of us sciencey nerds, I mean, I'm not a scientist, but I'm still a nerd, this is a fantastic book to read, and I can highly, highly recommend it. So these were the 3 tops, and as always, now on to the flops. And as I said at the beginning of the video, I read really, really fabulous books, and I had a hard time picking flops or finding books that I would consider flops. And in the end, I picked 2 books, both nonfiction books, that partly, the first one partly irked me, was just not for me, and the second one was not horrible books, that's what I want to say, but disappointments to me, or for some reason irksome to me. And the first one is Annie Dillard's modern classic, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, and it was published, let me see, 1974. It's about her observations with nature in the area where she lives, and she lives close to a creek called Tinker Creek, or at least back then she did. But it's also about finding God and finding, evidence for God, despite the fact that the world is cruel. I mean, I'm really shortcutting here, but so the religious stuff just doesn't work for me. I'm not a religious person. I don't believe in God. I'm not interested in people telling me why, when she looks at butterflies, this is evidence. You can find a spiritual experience if you are in nature, for sure. Nothing wrong for me with that, about reading about that. I mean, there's nothing wrong anyway, but reading about that. But this, use of nature in order to tell me or to prove to me that there is a God, that just doesn't interest me at all. But why it irked me, I read a couple other books by Annie Dillard, one about writing and one about a memoir, I think also. I feel it's pretentious. She is a really pretentious author to me. At least her writing comes across, that's the better way of putting it, her writing comes across for me as extremely pretentious, and that gets my hackles up immediately. If I find a book pretentious, it just doesn't work with me. I hate that. And that was the additional reason that I really thought Annie Dillard is not for me. I tried 3 or 4 books. With all of them, I had the same feeling that it's pretentious and that it's message heavy with messages that I'm not interested in. So this author just doesn't work for me. What can you do? And the other flop was a memoir about immigration. And that was Dina Nayeri's The Ungrateful Refugee, recently published, and I read this with Heidi again from my reading life, and it didn't work for either of us. I thought Dina Nayeri was born in Iran, I think, Iran? I can't even remember. There you go. Very good preparation. And then she had to flee because she comes from a Catholic family. She had to flee first to Qatar, and then in the end, she ends up through Italy, via Italy, and what have you, in the United States. I thought the premise of the book, to look at immigration and what it really means to be an immigrant, is topical, important, interesting. And she also includes stories of other immigrants that she meets later on in Holland, for instance, at a refugee center, and she talks to those people. So it's more a reportage / memoir, and the reportage parts I thought were good, not brilliant, but good. But the memoir part just didn't work for me. I felt the author came across as very unsympathetic, which is not good if you read a memoir. Even though, I mean, she can be the most lovely person, but it just didn't work for me. And there was the complete lack of any form of self-reflection when she talked about her life. So she tells things that are quite like, what? And she doesn't reflect about it at all. And I feel that is not what you should do in a memoir. So as a memoir, the memoir part of this book, I thought was just not good. And that's why it ended up in the flops. But I mean, to be fair, given the fact how fantastic these 2 months were reading-wise, me having difficulty finding books that would qualify for the flop, it's not a horrible book. It's just, in my opinion, not very good, and that was a pity. So those are the tops and flops for the months of June and July. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. As always, I'm looking forward to your comments about these books or other books, and I'll see you all soon in the next one.